We made it out the storm and moved into the light. In love with life, with the sun shining bright. Doing things right, with good things in sight. Trying to stay strong and hold on with all might. I'm a hip-hop junkie, I'll never be a flunky. All I do is rock on dope beats, it's funky. Living my best life, but I know there's more to come. Used to stare at my shoes, now I'm shining in the sun. With my head held high, admiring blue skies. Had to change my outlook, cause tomorrow I could die. So I pray before bed, and I pray before I rise. Looking for the truth, so I'm not blinded by the lies. Had to cut all ties with my old way of thought.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Now That We Have Recovered. Today we have my good friend Jake over here. He's going to share his story with us. Jake, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, man. I've been watching your first couple of episodes that have been coming out, and I think this is a great project that you guys are working on, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Hey, man. No problem, man. You popped into my head, and I was like, you know what? I think Jake has a good message to share, so let's get him on. Let's get him over here.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming out. So what I usually like to hear in the beginning is just a little bit about, you know, a week or a day or somewhere within a week, though, of before you got sober.
Yeah, a week is kind of hard for me to go back, so I'm going to go back just briefly.
Okay.
A couple weeks beforehand, but
okay.
You know, I was kind of in a spiral, and there was a lot of moments where I would kind of like pop out of the water and not feel like I'm drowning. And that last week or so, what was going on was I was back in college, and my dad came and visited from Ohio, and I picked him up, and you know, it was all fun. I kind of felt like I had everything going well, right? Well, the day that I picked him up, you know, it was kind of going right back into old habits. You know, my dad's a drinker, and I wanted to have a good time. And so we started drinking, and, you know, we met up with my sister and her now husband and went out to dinner and went back to her house and had a couple drinks. And, you know, I always felt like I could maintain my cool while drinking. And I had a pet peeve of people who lost control when they drank. And that's kind of how my dad was that night. And so I thought, you know, that I was well enough to drive. And so I made sure he got home safely and back to my sister's house, and I got on the highway, and I only drove for about 10 minutes. And what ended up happening was there was two people pushing a car on an off-ramp, and I rear-ended them. And went to jail, thought that I'd killed somebody. You know, it was a pretty graphic scene.
Yeah.
And, you know, I later found out that he had survived, and the other guy, he was pretty injured, but he survived as well.
Yeah.
And I bailed out, and with the condition that I go to a recovery program three days a week. And so I had a court card, and that was my first introduction into recovery. Yeah.
The guy survived? Or?
Yeah. The guy survived. One guy, he had a severely broken leg, but the one who was severely injured, he lost both of his legs. They were severed at the scene.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah. So you're let out and you have to go to these meetings.
Yep.
Okay. What's that look like?
It looked like me showing up exactly when it started, with a hoodie on, my hood pulled up as far as it can go up, hiding my eyes.
Yeah.
And my first meeting, I just cried the whole time. You know, it felt like everything was over. You know, my life was over, that I'd done this to somebody else. You know, the guilt and the shame, and yeah, man, it was just, it was hell. You know? Yeah. It was.
Did you want to get sober?
So I had brief moments where I recognized that I had an issue, you know, with my addiction. But when I first got to the meetings in recovery, I didn't have the knowledge that there was a way out. You know, so I didn't have any way to kind of desire recovery in the beginning.
Okay. When so you're hanging out in the meetings, no desire.
Yeah.
When do you feel like did a change happen somewhere in there where you made a shift?
Yeah, so like I said, I was going to these meetings 3 days a week and making sure I got it signed and trying to do my best to appeal to the courts and all that stuff. And what ended up happening was I went to this meeting and it was really dark. It was like a true candlelight where they turned off all the lights and lit candles. And there was this guy, he was sharing his experience, and it was a very small room. There was very few people in there, and I remember feeling like he was speaking directly at me, and he said a lot of things that resonated. And one of the things was if you're coming to a 12-step meeting, what are you doing not working the 12 steps? And that kind of shifted something. Where this is about 45 days after my accident, and I had been trying to stop, on my own, kind of white-knuckling it.
Okay.
And
so you were staying sober?
I was trying to stay sober. I had stopped drinking. I didn't stop drinking after my accident.
Okay.
What made me stop drinking the first time was after my accident, we had a family dinner, and my family drinks wine at dinner. And I remember reaching for the bottle before anybody's finished their second glass or their first glass for a second glass, and the look of just shame and almost anger I saw on one of my family members' face just made me kind of realize, like, this has to stop.
Yeah.
This has to change. But I couldn't give up smoking pot. That was something that I was carrying with me.
Yeah.
And it, about 45 days, like I said, that's kind of, I guess I had enough dry time, if you want to say, to clear out some of that fog.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that guy share those things, I was just like, I can't keep doing this.
Okay. And so that was the moment you said, okay, I'm going to really do this?
Yeah. So the next couple meetings that I went to, I finally raised my hand to speak. And in the beginning, when I would go to these 12-step programs and they would pass around a sheet to share, I thought it was a sign-in sheet and they were going to like cross-reference my sign-in card. And so I was like, volunteering to speak and not knowing what this thing was about at all, completely oblivious to this idea that it was volunteer and it's all this stuff. And nobody's watching you. And it was just funny to look back on that. But I started to actually speak when I was called upon after I wrote my name on the list. And I remember I would say, I have no idea what to say, but I think I need a sponsor. And I don't know what a sponsor is at this point. I don't know what a sponsor does. I just kept hearing this, get a sponsor, work the steps, get a sponsor, work the steps. And so that's what I would say, and I'd get people coming up to me after the meetings, like, here's my number. If you call me 7 days or every day for 7 days, I'll be your sponsor. And I was like, all right, dude. And I would leave and I would lose his number. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. But
I get it.
Yeah. And what ended up happening was I started going to that meeting, that candlelight meeting, on a regular basis. And I started to have this idea of trying to get a sponsor, and I was starting to learn what that meant, and I was building up the courage to ask somebody in specific to be my sponsor. And I finally mustered up the courage, and after the meeting, I shook his hand, and he said, have a good night, or sorry, but I thought we were going to say have a good night, and we were going to leave. And he shook my hand. He said, hey, Jacob, how you doing, man? And I said, I'm doing all right. And he's like, you got a sponsor? And I said, no. He's like, all right, well, I'll be your sponsor. And I was just like, all right.
They're like vultures, huh?
Yeah, but like I said, it was crazy though, because I was trying to build up that courage to ask this guy to be my sponsor, and he ended up reaching his hand out for me. And that's kind of what started the journey was that first night of getting that sponsor.
Okay. And so while you're staying sober, is your case going on too? Yeah.
So my case went on for 2 years. It ran from 2017 to 2019.
Okay.
And was trying to stay sober and trying to work this program of recovery, and while I was also battling this pretty heavy case that was over my head.
Yeah. Yeah. So that must have made you a little bit nervous too, right?
I was scared.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I can say is I was scared. I mean, of course, being nervous comes with being scared, but I was terrified.
Yeah, and you're finding sobriety through that too. So you're facing your fears in every way, right?
Yeah.
And you're dealing with all of that sober.
Yeah.
So you're not putting in and you're scared. You might be going to prison.
Yeah.
You're learning how to live again sober. That's a lot, dude.
It was.
Yeah.
And I can look back on it now, and you know, and it wasn't that long ago, but where I was then was I can't believe that was me, that I remained sober doing that.
Yeah, I mean, that you feel like that would be a very triggering circumstance, right? That would be weighing on your head all day long, and so you continued staying sober, facing that fear, and that's incredible, dude. Yeah,
I mean, and if it wasn't for the 12 steps in this program that I was working, I would not have been able to do it.
Yeah,
that's the only reason why I was able to do it. You know, as I continued to get more active in this program and be more honest with that guy who was sponsoring me at the time, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah,
you know, I was looking for any way to avoid it, and then, you know, with the 12 steps of that program, I was able to kind of suit up and show up.
Did you? So while you're getting sober and for the next 2 years, because you said for 17 to 19, right? Are you rebuilding your life?
Yeah, a little bit at a time. You know, one of the things that I was trying to do prior to that accident was I was like I had said, I was in college and I was trying to get an internship.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to interview with this company, and that was supposed to be, I think, Tuesday. And my accident happened on a Saturday night, Sunday morning, and so I was in jail during my interview. And, you know, by luck or grace or what have you, that company decided to allow me to re-interview.
Okay.
You know, they pushed my interview back, and then I interviewed with them, and you know, early on in those first moments of recovery, I already saw the value of being honest. And so in my interview, I told him that, you know, without going into graphic specifics, that, you know, I'd love to work for you guys, but I just want to let you know I'm currently fighting a case for a DUI accident.
Yeah.
And they still hired me. Yeah. So, you know, that was one of the things that I was kind of putting my life together, so to speak, along the way, and finishing up that college program, you know, trying to show my family that, you know, I wasn't going to run from this. So there was a lot going on.
Yeah. It seems like it's crazy when we get sober, like crazy stuff just happens to us, like being able to work, going through those circumstances.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't normally happen.
Yeah.
And it seems like things like that happen all the time for people in recovery. I don't know what it is. I mean, we go through a shitstorm too.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like weird things just happen to us, man, where you're just like, it's out of normal. So that's pretty cool that you were able to work, still going to school.
Yep.
Learning how to deal with your feelings, your emotions. God, man. So what ends up happening in 2019? Are you ready to go there yet?
So, yeah, I mean, so I did recovery from, you know, shortly after my accident, all the way up until 2019. And like I had said, it's an ongoing case, and they're throwing out these really crazy consequences.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have spent maybe 6 hours in a holding tank for a ticket one time, just because they couldn't process it, and so I had to sit. And that's my experience with jail. And so I'm hearing about all these terms and strikes and these years of potential having to go away, and I'm just getting more and more scared.
Yeah.
And for a while there, I kind of started to shut down. You know, I was still doing recovery. I was still doing 12-step programs, but I feel like mentally I kind of started to shut down a bit.
Yeah.
And in July, I believe it was July of 2019, we were gonna take it to trial because we had been given, you know, some really crazy offers on time.
Like, what did those offers look like?
So prior to us deciding to go to trial, it was I think it was 2 strikes and 6 years. And like I said, I had no jail experience, so 6 years was like, whoa, that's pretty heavy. And the last offer that got put on the table was 4 years, 4 months, and I believe they knocked it down to 1 strike.
Okay.
And I talked to my attorney at the time, and I told her, I was like, man, in my head, it doesn't seem like much of a difference between 4.5 years or 6 years. And because she had told me that if I took it to trial and lost, that my exposure for losing and declining that offer was probably around 6 years.
Okay.
I said, well, let's fight it. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
You know, and so we're preparing to go to trial, and they come up with another offer, and they say, well, we'll offer you 1 strike and a lid of 5 years. And what that meant was the judge would decide what my sentencing was, and he can't go above 5 years if he decides to give me a term.
Yeah.
And that day I turned to my attorney, and we talked about it for a minute, and she had told me, she was like, I think this is our best opportunity to try to get it lower than those 4 years, 4 months.
Yeah.
And so we pushed a sentencing trial off for about 2 months, and 2-3 months. We went back in September. The judge, you know, opened the sentencing. I gave a statement. I tried to do an apology to the victims, and then the victims made a statement, and then the judge was like, all right, well, based off of all the evidence, I think that the proper sentencing will be 4 years, 4 months. So, you know, it was kind of a gut punch, because I ended up signing that deal for something that I was trying, you know, I was trying to get something other than 4 years, 4 months, and that's why I took that offer. But, you know, it happens.
Bamboozled.
Yeah, kind of. That's how I felt.
Yeah, that's how they do it. They did something like that to me too, man. Not for prison time, but county time.
Yeah.
But still. So you go through prison, and you stay sober in prison when you get there?
No, so after the judge swung the gavel, it was like a sober blackout.
Yeah.
I don't remember much of those first couple days after it happened. I think the fear and the anxiety just kind of made me shut down.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said, I fought it for almost 2 years, and the judge decided that he would give me 2 weeks to turn myself in.
That's cool.
And that was, you know, wrapping up my affairs, putting in a week notice to this company I was working for, and it was really hard.
Yeah.
But I walked into prison sober, and one of the last things that happened before I actually went into the first jail cell was there was a bailiff where I turned myself in.
Yeah.
And as he put the cuffs on me, he looked at me and he said, "Man, I just want to tell you that I'm grateful that I got to see you walk through this sober." And he was like, I have 15 years myself, and you know, it's not many people who could do this. And I was just like, whoa, that was cool. And so I had kind of that you know, recognition walking into the jail cell, and I was just like, whoa, that's pretty neat. And so I did my best to try to stay sober. I made it for about 3 months. And when I touched down at the main line, I got put into a cell with somebody who was making prison wine.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
a little bit of Bruno.
What am I getting into?
Yeah.
You know. And I told the dude straight up, I was like, look, man, I don't want anything to do with that. Like, this is your house. Like, I'm not gonna try to say, you know, don't do that. Like, but you know, I don't partake. And at the time, I was trying to get into religious text, and you know, still trying to maintain my sobriety. And I had a bad day. It was another day that he was offering me to taste, and I said, man, screw it. And it was about a tablespoon or two, you know, it was less than a shot, you know, of what I tried. And as soon as it went in, I was just like, oh man, I want more.
Yeah.
And luckily I think that I had enough of experience in recovery and hearing other people relapse to know that if I would to continue that, where I was going to go.
Yeah.
And so that was my relapse. It was very
Couple
short.
teaspoons?
It was I didn't even get drunk. And there's times where I look back and I'm like, man, why didn't I just get drunk? Like, I could have made it worth it. But I remember, you know, those people sharing their experience on relapsing and how long it took them to come back.
Yeah.
And the other thing that flashed through my mind was, you know, how could I go look at my family during visiting?
Yeah.
Knowing that I'm in here, and after I put them through everything to go back, you know.
Yeah, and then when people get involved in drinking and doing drugs in prison too, it comes with a lot of bullshit. Right?
Yeah, that was another thing. I had a lot of good examples in there of why I shouldn't mess around. You know, but that didn't stop me from pushing that line. With the obsession for craving kicked in for me, and what ended up happening was I would purchase prison alcohol, and I would keep it in my cell, and I would basically stare at it, and eventually build up enough courage to just get rid of it.
Yeah, damn.
And that went on for about 8 months, where I would do this cycle. I would buy some, have the intention to drink it, and eventually something would help me get through it and get rid of it. And yeah, I mean, around this time is when the pandemic happened and visiting shut down, and all programs of outside people coming in and sharing their experience, there was none of that.
Yeah.
It was a very lonely world. You know, I felt like I was really the only one who wanted to walk the path that I was trying to walk.
So there was no fellowshipping or support or people doing programs or anything?
Yeah.
No? And you made it through just white knuckling?
The first 8 months I did.
Yeah.
Around, I think it was November of 2020 is when I was put up for a transfer. And I got transferred down to Riverside County, and it was a low security facility, and we had a lot of freedoms.
Yeah.
And I started to talk to other inmates and you know, just casual bullshitting. And one day we're outside and we're talking, and the idea of recovery comes up, and we discovered that there's at least 3 of us in that small circle talking who had backgrounds in a 12-step program. And we were all still trying to stay sober. And we were like, you know, we all noticed that there was big books from a 12-step program and in the library. And we were like, you want to read sometime? And so we started reading together.
Okay.
And that was my first time in a year and like 2 months of meeting another person who was interested in recovery.
Was that a relief?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. It just was like a walking into an environment where you can finally breathe again.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice, man.
Yeah.
For where you're at.
Yeah.
I bet that was an incredible experience.
It was.
So you've been in prison, you've been shipped off to a different area. How much longer were you there?
I was there for a little over a year, I believe.
Okay.
Because what happened was there was a transition period where I had to go to another facility before going to Riverside County. And so I ended up being down in Riverside for exactly a year. Yeah.
Okay, so how long did you actually do?
So I ended up doing 2 years and 3 months.
Okay.
On my 4-year, 4-month sentence.
And most of that time you were sober?
Yeah, most of
Okay.
it. So there was only that brief, little teaspoons.
Okay. So when you came home, being isolated from the outside world and stuff, and then you get to come home, how was that transition? And did you jump back into fellowshipping? And did you jump back into working a program and hooking up with old friends?
So that group of people or men in prison, that conversation about reading in the book turned into us deciding to approach the staff there and create our own 12-step program.
Okay.
And we met on a regular basis, and we started working steps together. And so I started getting back into the flow of recovery.
Okay.
And while I was still dealing with, the guilt of relapsing and knowing that I was going to get out, I had a lot of thoughts of if I was going to go back to those meetings. And I don't know where it came from. I think it had a lot to do with fear and coming back into society. And I didn't know if I was going to go back or 12-step program. And one of those guys, the day that I was paroling, he asked me if I was going to go back. And I was like, yeah, I probably will. He's like, man, whatever you decide to do, I hope that you get out and you just talk to somebody, you know? And I was like, I talk all the time. And he's like, you know what I mean? And so he kind of helped guide me, into returning. And when I got out, I tested positive for COVID. And so I had to isolate. And but something told me that as soon as I was done with my quarantine, that I should just go check it out. Yeah. And so 5 days after I paroled, I decided to go to a meeting, and I ran into somebody who I knew, and they immediately recognized me and gave me a big old hug and said, I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy that you're back. And then he's like, how long have you been sober now? And I'm like, well, I'm about to come up on 2 years again. I relapsed while I was away. And he's like, oh, that's great. Do you want to share your experience tonight? I was
First night out.
Sure. I was taught to say yes. And so I shared my experience that night. And after doing that, I knew this is where I belonged.
Okay. And so has life been going good since?
It's been good. It's been hard. This has been the most growth in less than 12 months that I've ever experienced. Okay. A lot of things have come up that I wasn't aware of. I thought that prison didn't have as big of an effect on me as I did, and I think that just has to do with the fact that I had so many walls built up as a defense mechanism while being in there. And the thing is like prison wasn't something I'd ever do again. Yeah. It was not a playground, but I think that the pandemic, it really helped make my term mild. I mean, it was awful to be away, but the bullshit that can typically happen in prison was kind of negated because we were forced to 23-hour lockdown for most of my stay.
That could drive a man a little crazy though, too,
bit.
Right?
Yeah, a little bit. But I still maintained a job while I was in there, and it just kind of became a Groundhog's Day. You wake up, you get your stuff ready, you go to work, you come back, you chill out, you go to sleep, and you just rinse and repeat. And so there's a lot of emotions and things that I didn't process for almost 2.5 years. Okay. And so this year it's been a lot of that. Now that I'm calm and safe and everything's going well, and they're starting to creep up, especially around the holidays. So
something about spending a lot of time with yourself changes you when you're sober.
Yeah.
you really got to feel everything and take everything in,
Yeah.
and you don't have a lot of distractions.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're home now.
Mm-hmm.
What are your plans? This will be my last question because I think we're running close. 2 minutes. What are your plans for the future? And what are you hoping to get from this life of recovery?
So my plans for the future, like I said, I interviewed with a company after my accident, and I worked for them the whole time. I was prepared to go away, or not knowing I was going away, but I worked for them the whole time, and they told me when I let them know that I had to leave that it may seem like a long time to you, but when you get out, they'll if there's a spot for you, we'll bring you back on. And I thought it was lip service. I thought it was somebody who saw somebody in struggles and just wanted to be helpful. But the Monday after I paroled, my old boss hit me up. He found out that I was out, and he got me my job back. And so I got back to work 2 weeks after being paroled, and with an amazing company, with people who actually love me, and so I plan to continue my career with them, and to be there for my family. My sister has 3 kids now, and beautiful kids, and it's great to be able to be in their life, and to be sober and to be helpful, and recovery is just it's led to so many opportunities I didn't know would take me to.
Yeah, 'cause if you're still drinking and you got out of prison, if you're still drinking at that job and then you went to prison and got out, you probably wouldn't have got that job back.
No. I started as a student intern and quickly got offered a semi-permanent position.
Yeah.
I would not have maintained that job. I never maintained jobs very well.
Yeah. One more question. What do you want to leave the newcomer with?
So, if I was to look at myself and if I was to approach myself being new, I think that something that I feel would benefit a newcomer is that just give this thing a shot. You never know what could happen. We know what happens when we put in. Recovery is all it's something it's worth it. It's as long as you give it a shot, but you got to try, And back then, this was my only option, and I'm so grateful that I made this decision.
Awesome. All right, I got one more question for you.
Yeah.
What do you feel like the best thing recovery's done for you?
So recovery has allowed me to be accountable and to be there for people. Something that happened just recently in this past year was my brother-in-law decided that he wanted to try recovery out. He hit his own bottom. And he was the one that took me to my first AA meeting.
Yeah.
And so I was given this blessing of an opportunity to take him to his first meeting when he decided to give us a shot.
Yeah.
And and so I helped him get plugged in and kind of showed him where I was going and talked to him a little bit about what it was about. And and it was great. Earlier this month he received his 90-day chip. And it was great. I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah.
If I decided to come out and not go back to meetings and eventually pick up. And it's a gift that I couldn't ever. I would never be able to achieve.
Wonderful experience, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.